Ladies and gentlemen, the board is back in session. Please govern yourself accordingly. Pam, you have the floor.
Okay, so how much more office space were we gonna add to this?
You would add, with what that plan was presented previously, it would add 2,400 square feet. So 2,400 versus 4,000 is the other space.
Okay, so that would make this a total of 4,800?
4,800. Well,
So, I think that it would help to have the cost of the building, the renovation of that building, the renovation of this building, you know, side by side, like the move, we have to move, we have to renovate. What would be the cost of, paying taxes on two buildings? What is gonna be the total outlay at the end of this whole event?
and some of that I can't answer, but some of it I can as you know, there's obviously, you know, it's apples and oranges with the two. With it, and it's 4,800 this space, but that space plus the 24 here is you know 6,400 square feet. So it's not the 4,800 versus the 4,000. Plus you're comparing taxes and that sort of thing. You have two
Well,
assets now. You have two different assets.
Okay, so I'm not actually doing it either, well, it is an either or, but what I'm looking for is, the need and the cost factor. So I think that when we make a decision on this, that the board should understand that they're making a decision on owning two buildings, plus having the move and the total as close to a total renovation cost as we can get. And I would think that when we did renovate the building, that we would want it to be as modern and up to date as possible. Just like Gary mentioned, the storm windows and things like that, and those are costly to put that glass in. So to have glass that's hurricane proof, and also like I say, the insurance that we're carrying on both buildings. So I think we need to understand, and that's why I said this might not be a question for you, maybe this will be a question for April, as to have the full cost of having two buildings would be, opposed to just renovating this building.
And keep in mind two things. One, definitely I'm all for impact glass. It's not a requirement. Obviously, it would help. You can always use the the corrugated metal shutters. Once you hit that 50% threshold on renovation, now you're putting yourself in a situation where, and I don't know where you would end up at, obviously, with this, but if the further you went with renovation, once you hit a threshold, now you've got to bring the building fully into compliance with every modern. So so I'm just those are pros and cons to everything. But I mean, certainly these items can be considered and looked at. And that can be done as part of the due diligence phases as well.
Well, I think that would help. I don't know if April's hearing any of this, but it would help to get some of this information so that we could make a better decision and to know what we need to budget for.
Are you finished for now?
Yes, I am.
Gary, did you want the floor again?
No, I think I've pretty well expressed my opinion, just evaluating this whole thing. No.
Danny, Mr. Dubauer made some observations a few minutes ago, which I tried to understand that they were coming from a professional in the business. And he you didn't mention in your, description on page 2 of your memo. My question is, if we're going to get to the bottom of some of the issues that he raised, are we not going to need the services of a professional to look at the plumbing and the air conditioning and the roof and the asbestos and the mold and everything? We don't have anybody that can do that. I suspect you know or can find folks who are professionals in that business, and if so, give us an idea of how much that kind of a professional examination costs.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's obviously not something we do, and they have to be certified and professionals at doing that. And Mr. Neubauer would probably know better than I would as to what that cost would be. I would assume for a building of this size to do a thorough inspection and provide that service and that documentation, it could probably be done for under $5,000, but I'm not sure what
Maybe
that
we need to
would.
go to Fred, CSA.
Fred at CSA?
Yeah.
What are you guys
Construction.
talking about?
Construction type
Mhm.
individual.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and I mean, there are other people, and I could actually bring there are a number of contractors that do renovation work that
Sure.
even prior to doing an inspection, you could ask to go and do a courtesy review. But, I mean, once you make a commitment to pursue, if you make that decision, you're gonna go through that due diligence phase. I mean, we could sit down and we could cost, because a lot of the items that Mr. Neubauer mentioned, are in my head. We just don't know. We just don't know the condition of the roof. We don't know the condition of the HVAC.
You've got a building that's how old? You've got plumbing that's how old? You've got bathrooms that are how old?
Yeah.
You've got that electrical panel itself sitting outside, and you look at it and you go, And so just even to reset a circuit breaker, somebody's supposed to go walking outside. The design of the thing was such that Westinghouse gave the building, if you're not unaware of it, to the Girl Scouts. Westinghouse did, okay?
You mean the Westinghouse?
As compared to the other WCI?
The benign Westing.
Sure. And the practicality, the functionality of the thing, and I know that, when you talk about gutting people, antennas go up. In many cases, if you're gonna have something be really functional, you do. You take it right down to the walls, and then you're putting up. And that's the easy stuff. It's when the trades come in, the plumbers, the electricians, air conditioning, that's when the dollar signs start really flying around. And you don't want to do this as though it's just going to be a tenancy type situation. You want to do it as a place of pride for the district and for the people and the staff that are going to work there. Thus, the countertops, the bathrooms, all that stuff needs to be redone. Believe me, it's going to look chopped up and it's going to look whatever, and it becomes, again, a satellite location where you've got two different functions of this district separated, as compared to creating what we've never had, and what we finally need is to create this and properly manage. So it's twofold from my part. The fact that it's an older building that's got all the older stuff.
Well, 24 years old, according to what I've seen, which is about the same age as this building.
Yeah, and it's got all Formica and all that stuff that goes along with it, that kind of age.
Right.
And the air conditioning units. Look at them today as compared to that new unit that you've got and I've got and all the other stuff, and you know how long that they last.
I know, but we don't know that there haven't been recent air conditioners put in that. We don't know that there's not been a new roof put on it, and we won't know until we
Bill,
have a professional.
That roof isn't new.
Say again?
That roof isn't new.
It doesn't look new to me either, but
Stick with your-
I've made mistakes before.
Stick with your gut. But just even the practicality, start with the practicality of segregating this district into two different parts from a management point of view.
That bothers me too, but also trying to make a gold purse out of a sow here bothers me.
Well, this is newer to begin with, and like Danny said, it's a metal building, which lends itself a lot better to be able to add on, and also still have the structural integrity. We still haven't gotten into the fire sprinklers and all these other things that we've talked about before, which that hasn't even been brought up regarding this building, which would hold or house all of our records and all of that stuff. We'll study this stuff ad infinitum.
If it were an easy decision, we would have made it by now.
No, we were in a decision and we were making it and we were moving, and now we're digressing to something
Well,
else.
there's some truth
And
to
the
that.
one other thing,
Yeah.
for anybody to have come up with the numbers that they put in a public document as far as purchase price, et cetera,
Yeah,
was absolutely a
shoot.
total mistake. Having said that, that building's functionality is extremely limited, per se, in the real estate business. Who else is gonna buy it? The one party that's going to be our competition, who'll worry about that somebody's gonna come and grab that thing, well, they haven't grabbed it for quite some time. And the only place that really it fits to, in my profession, is the church. That would be the person, if I represented it, that's who I'd be selling that to, because that's a no-brainer, but they don't want it. So, again, I think we stick with the original plan and we get this thing finished, and it'll be a place of pride.
Mr. Attorney,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Newbauer just raised an issue about pricing on the assumption that we were gonna go ahead. What, if any, of this can be done by you and the
Mhm.
particular seller and da-da-da-da-da?
Sure.
How much of this all has to be done in the open space?
Most of it. What the board can do, if the board decides to proceed, is authorize to the chairman to execute a contract with an offer not to exceed X number of dollars with a number of due diligence items and authorizing a deposit of Y number of dollars. And on that line, I would not recommend a non-refundable deposit in a real estate transaction. I would recommend, if there was to be a deposit, it'd be fully refundable, based upon the results of the inspections, which are, I have a whole list of additional inspections that we need to be addressed. Zoning, land use covenants. Lee County may need to approve this, but that could all be achieved in the 60 days. We'd know the answer, yes or no. The air conditioning system, all those other items can be part of the due diligence, but there, I think, because there might be zoning questions we need to get resolved. Questions whether or not it's been not used for such a period of time that we'd have to bring it up to code. Make sure that we don't have those kind of hurdles. But that's all typical due diligence in 60 days, and that's why I would not recommend a non-refundable deposit. I would recommend a refundable deposit. But if the board were to proceed, what we would need is authorization for the chairman to execute a contract, provide an offer of, of X number of dollars, Y deposit, with a 60 days is recommended. You can say you want more than that for the due diligence period. And that would be the offer that would be submitted. And then the seller would take that offer or counter, and if the counter, would need to come back to this board.
Can it be done at all in a closed-door session?
No.
It has to be totally public.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any closed door products. Cale, you're scowling at me, no?
I-
Oh, okay. I'm not aware of any, I mean.
I thought real estate
would think
acquisitions
that-
could be
Yeah,
in a closed session, until there's an agreement,
correct.
and then that's public.
I know that happens with school boards are different. Schools have that specific provision.
Yeah.
Let me check.
Would you
I'll
look
check
that
real
up for us
quickly.
when you have time?
I will do it right now.
In the meantime, if you'll allow me, Danny, to suggest you sit down for a moment. April has suggested that Chris talk to us for a moment about his experiences in an arrangement similar to this. Would you please give us your experiences?
Sure. Again, Chris Shoemaker, utility manager, and I've worked for two municipal utilities, and in those cases, the admin and customer service were in separate locations. And that was because they wanted the customer service and administration closer to the customer base, where you have a facility like this where you more have commercial vehicles and equipment moving in and out. And it wasn't really a problem because everything's been done over the internet, customer service, work orders being issued, that type of thing. And on one side, I see favorable to that building and its location for access and customers and parking, better than this, but being on Gateway Boulevard, and this being, it is an ideal operational type facility with the bays and the room it has and opportunities to, say, even turn this room into a secured inventory and map room. And on the other side, I think, as Mr. Dubauer said, it's really the bottom line. What's it gonna cost your customer? What's gonna be the bottom line of the facility? This building, I think if you're gonna put money into it, it'd be like putting a set of new tires on a car. You're not gonna get the money back out. Is there an opportunity for any appreciation or actual value as an asset to the organization? And but I agree with the board in some of those. You really need to look at all those costs.
What's been your experience when you had the administration in one location and the operations in the other? Did it pose a lot of difficulties in daily operation?
No, because in a lot of cases, your customers, when they're interacting with the operations and field staff, it's out there when they're in the field talking to them, either at their homes or at a pump station or in the field, and the functions were so different. It really wasn't a problem at all. And if you have a central location in administration where you're issuing work orders and getting customer calls and customer complaints and sending it out, that's all done now over the wire, over email, even with the staff being out in the field, things being sent to them by their phone. And just because the functionality, again, is so separate, and having the commercial vehicles and the equipment and everything here works fine. Obviously, you wouldn't want it over at the Girl Scouts. But having both of them here, it's really just an access issue. Is it good enough here for your customers, or would you want a little better place and a little more access and parking for your customers? Is there any advantage to other district functions, like having your board meetings where people can park over there and access it over there? But I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that the bottom line should dictate it and what the cost to the customer is.
Thank you very much.
While you're there, though, what other electronics does our staff need in the form of computers, handhelds, et cetera, to improve their job?
Well, the systems that are in place now with your SCADA and telemetry and remote controlling can all be done over a smartphone. Now, if you're looking at further asset management where you're going out there, like right now we're exercising valves out in the field, and we're trying to move a lot of this utility infrastructure onto a GIS system so that information's readily available and it's right there. If you ask me off the top of my head and looking at it, and I haven't done a thorough needs analysis, type of a Trimble unit where when you're out in the field, you can say, okay, I'm on top of this valve, mark it, and put it in the GIS system. That could be helpful, but otherwise.
We don't have that.
No, sir.
Give me a ballpark idea.
Well, something like that could run several $1,000s. It could be $3,500, $4,000. It involves some training too. But
Okay.
when your staff's out in the field and they go and, even your meters, if you have your meter reader staying there or a larger meter, you press it in, key the code, and then it goes into your GIS system, and it's like, well, where is that meter located? Right here. And then if you're gonna model a system or do some hydraulic analysis, you have all that locational information.
How many of those do we need?
Well, you could just use one, and while the people are out in the field, keying that data in. And really, any type of utility now, what you're doing is that capital and those expenditures you're making, okay, we spent this money where? here at this lift station, you know, it's keyed into that location.
So,
Yeah.
so the chairman could authorize a $3,500 purchase.
Good, but I'd like to look at the GIS functionality and do a little bit more of a needs analysis to
Cool.
make
When
sure.
will you have that back to us?
You jumped into
Can we,
that one.
can we stay on topic?
Well, let me talk to, we're meeting with the GIS person the next week, but I could have a good idea that the next meeting. I'd be glad to give you an update.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll see you next meeting, Chris.
Dan, Danny, do you have more that you want to tell us that's gonna help us go forward on this?
No, I think Chris provided a lot of good insight from his experience, and I can tell you from, you know, my experience, larger, you know, communities, cities, counties, it is common that your operations would be separated from your city hall or your administration. Obviously, we're a lot smaller here, but he has better experience with the, you know, smaller utilities and that sort of thing. But I mean, there's obviously still a lot of questions. We knew there were a lot of questions. I think, you know, you have two good options. Obviously, they're two very different options. One keeps everybody together. The other creates an asset for the district and separates administration from operations, which has its benefits as well as, you know, as Chris mentioned. But the other side of that with small staff is you're not right there together. So, I mean, obviously there's stuff that needs to be looked at. So we could certainly go and further evaluate, but I would be hesitant until we know a little bit more about that, you know, that building. I could put costs all day long on what it may cost to replace, you know, plumbing or, you know, the HVAC or the roof, but until you know exactly what condition those items are in, I'm not sure what value that would provide.
Danny, can you contact Fred?
Yeah, we can contact Fred. I can contact Fowler, who also does, you know, this, Rob Fowler, who
Yeah.
does this type of work. We could,
Why don't we have those two, would they do a quickie, even if Bill wanted to go and be there when they're there and do a quick look through eval? You know, if Bill buys them lunch in a Starbucks?
Starbucks doesn't serve lunch, is worth talking about.
well,
Okay, Bill's taking them to Angelina's, no.
I'm sure knowing that there's potential work out of it, they would both be willing to, you
There
know,
you
to
go.
do that. But
There you
that's at board's pleasure. and I
Bill
don't-
can get into it firsthand.
Okay, no, wait a minute, before you load me up on that. Pam made an excellent comment about costing,
Yes.
which have got to be developed before we take any serious steps. The actual condition of the building, roof, plumbing, electric, on and on, has got to be looked at before we take any serious steps as far as an offer is concerned. Can you?
But is
I'm
that true, though?
going
I mean,
too far.
Gary,
Maybe going too far.
don't you typically, in a purchasing agreement with real estate, you would put a contract down, you'd have a time period where you would do your inspections, you would do all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Isn't that part of the process?
Here's the point.
This,
It's
go ahead, please.
two ways.
And I just,
Are you convinced that this is gonna slip out of your hands?
what, the building?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I
Do you-
don't know what the market's yielding right now, I have no idea.
This is a very honest question. In your gut, do you feel this is gonna slip out of your hands?
Do I think someone's gonna come in within the next 30 days and buy this building?
Yes.
No.
Thank you. Therefore,
That means you agree, right?
yeah.
Wait a minute, let me change mine.
Go ahead. You know, each of us has our own whatever. So, having said that, don't put the pressure on yourself in that way. Instead, do your due diligence on your own and start to feel the comfort that way.
Yeah, I mean, can we do that? That's really the question. Can we can have an inspection, we can have all that kind of stuff prior to any contract? The
Fred-
seller will allow us to do that?
The two people that Danny and I are talking about
Who is Fred?
are very nice man.
Flintstone?
Very nice man. Fred, if you hear that, you're a very nice man. Somebody you could trust, in both cases. And,
Are these professionals in the business that you're talking about?
Yes.
Well,
What's the-
I thought maybe a name would be appropriate.
Well, I think, I mean, to me, it gets down to, and not to interrupt anybody, but it gets down to, you have the possibility, we can certainly have a cursory review performed, and I don't mind at all reaching out to, you know, Fred or Rob Fowler, the people in the business, and I'm sure that they would do that. But as Tony has mentioned too, your other option is, you know, to put a contract out there that allows you to hire the professional to do, to give yourself that period of time with a refundable, you know, deposit, and have a professional. So we can do it. I mean, I don't mind at
Yeah,
all
and-
meeting out there tomorrow or next week with Fred or Rob.
And here's my point, not to interrupt you, Danny, but I think first to me, I think that the location is a viable option, because one, it gives us 2,000 additional square footage, net additional square footage. We're putting a location that's more centrally located to the community. I mean, to me, on the surface, it seems like a very good idea to me. Gives us the utility, room for expansion. I've looked at both plans. I think with the renovation of this building, we're not really getting that much, you know, we're not getting a whole lot of additional stuff, at least not for the utilities. If anything, the utilities is pigeonholed exactly where they're at today. Not a whole lot of room for expansion. We're creating new space for administration. So it gives us 4,000 square feet that we can just dedicate to admin. And I understand what Gary's saying. We need to do our due diligence. I get that. But I think on the surface, you know, what I'm looking for is, do we feel like it's a good idea to even, that space is something that we should look at, that we would all agree that, yes, if all things being equal, if the roof is sound, if all this stuff is fine, we would vote to approve the purchase. If there's disconsent on the board to say, we don't even know if you know, if we all agree that location is even viable, I don't know, even if you come back and say that everything's great, we're really still back at square one. So
Let's, you're right, let's just take a straw poll of the board and say, if everything goes right, are we gonna take the next step toward
I mean,
the
is
purchase of this building?
Is the majority that it's a viable option that would seriously be considered if our due diligence is done and we don't find anything outside of what we budgeted? Because the engineer says it's viable and they recommend. The utilities manager says it's viable, they recommend. And the operations manager said it's viable and they recommend.
Then you would go forward.
I would go forward, yeah.
Margaret, would you go forward?
Probably yes.
Pam, would you go forward?
Probably, if the numbers, I am really more interested in how these numbers are
Well,
gonna come out.
we're assuming everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
So
a
that's my-
reasonable
that's my biggest issue.
point right there.
If it's
Is
not a good deal, we're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Right, because, you know, if you're involved in real estate and construction, it never comes out to be what's on the paper. It's always gonna be more.
yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we have looked at every avenue, because at the end of the day, our residents are going to have to contribute to this.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we look at the numbers.
Okay, but you would go forward if everything
If
goes.
it's viable, yes.
Gary?
how many administration people do we have? Pam should know that off the top of her head.
5?
5. You're buying that building for 5 people.
That bothers me initially.
Oh, it bothers me, period.
Well, it bothers me, period. But what I don't know is, with the build-outs of Hampton Park and Pelican and all this other stuff, how many more,
Make it 7.
administration people
Make
we're
it
gonna-
7, make it 7. You're buying that building for 7 people and a meeting room?
Yeah, but does it, I mean, look at it,
No, I'm looking at it straightforward in my own way. You're buying a building for 5 people, maybe 7 people, because Bill wants to expand it, and a boardroom.
Is there utility expansion that we'll need as well?
No. But the utilities are staying here. That's admin. You've said that repeatedly. So I'm not changing the ground rules. You're building that thing, that asset, as you're calling it, and it's not gonna be an asset. There's nobody else that you can sell it to that you can make money off of it. Therefore, it's not an asset. It's a cost. So you've got all the costs to maintain that separate place, including landscaping, et cetera, and taxes and insurance and all the other stuff.
No taxes.
For somebody's gotta pay the CDD for crying out loud.
He doesn't pay real estate.
For
Correct.
5 people at this time, so that we can all go aga, 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 and listen to the echoes.
Okay, you've made your point. Do I understand that you will not want to proceed?
No.
Well, I will. That's 4-1. So,
So the question is, do we proceed with the contract?
No.
Or do we just give
No.
Danny permission to do the pre-due diligence?
we have.
Yeah, cursory,
Right,
yeah.
we'll give
Okay.
Danny permission to see if he can get the owners of the building to allow us to tromp through, over, above, under, and give us a really good idea of what that non-asset is really like.
Well, I mean, that, we would be asking, the contractors that I know to do a cursory review, so it'll be based on that. It'll be based on a cursory review.
Is that
And
okay?
would
How
it-
much is that gonna cost?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that I would be asking them to do that if
As a
they come
favor?
back and, as a favor. Because we're also hearing there's the comments that Mrs. Gill made and also Mr. Neubauer has now made as to, not only the, trying to compare apples to apples in terms of costs of this facility versus that facility, but also now the operating cost as well as the per capita cost of those improvements. So will we also like to come back to the board with those, what we might see those costs?
I think we've gotta have that.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
if we don't have that, there's no sense in talking any further.
Yeah, we need to also add in there our relocation expenses for the renovation. If that's 60 days or 90 days.
If we were to renovate this
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah, because that adds additional costs that we haven't,
Right,
haven't
right.
calculated.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may also suggest, if the focus be on cost, is that Danny be authorized also to contact the appropriate Lee County zoning or community development services folks. Since I understand that building's not been used for 1 year, is that correct, Danny?
Hasn't been used for 1 year, and not only that we may have issues, but also, as we understand, it's likely zoned, it likely would have to go through rezoning.
Well, may or may not, but I think the important part is there's a provision in the Land Development Code that says, and it talks about in commercial areas of certain PUDs, and we need to have the county first tell us this is neighborhood park community facilities, not commercial, that if you have a discontinuance of a use for a year or more, then you have to then comply with certain other commercial standards. And so that's part of, I think that'd be important to have them check on that also.
Yeah, we've done a little research on that, and we're just not sure.
Yeah.
We know that originally that PUD was a public school, park, or church.
Community facilities, yeah.
And there was
Community
something in
facilities.
one of the real estate brochures, I don't think it's this one, it must have been an older one, that said something about expansion, and it said would need WCI approval.
Well, it's a little bit misleading. There are covenants on the property limited.
Old WCI?
That's the old WCI. There are covenants on the property saying it can be only used for this Girl Scout Center, but with the approval of WCI, it can be used for something else. But then there's a document that says WCI said, we no
We don't
longer
have
are
anything
going
to
to
do, okay,
enforce
I
it.
just saw that somewhere, and
But you may need Lee County's approval.
Okay.
You know, it talks about when the covenants were imposed, because the Lee County Administrator got together, the county attorney's office got together, and they said, this is good for Girl Scout. So that could be some of the initial things also that typically would be part of the due diligence. But more importantly, we want to get away from them treating it as having to upgrade or retrofit.
We'll do pre-due diligence.
Yeah.
Okay. Danny, you
No,
understand
it's
the majority of the board is agreeing
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
that you're gonna have some professionals look over the building, and you're gonna do a lot more, time on task as far as the, cost of running this thing.
Yes, sir.
or both of them, the cost of the entire plan.
I have
Okay?
a full understanding of,
Yeah, and Mr.
My
Chairman, I've done
requirements.
an initial check in the Sunshine Law Manual. The legislature in their infinite wisdom have decided that real property purchases, appraisals, and offers by counties, by educational facilities of schools, by municipalities and state agencies are exempt from the public records law. But I found nothing yet for CDDs. So that's the legislature in their infinite wisdom.
We're a public agency, come on.
Yeah, I'll keep looking, but I mean, they've exempted all these other entities, but I did not find anything for CDDs.
We can presume that they intended to exempt us.
But we
No,
should-
I
Good
put
job,
guessing what the
Ann.
legislature meant.
Okay,
But I will
Danny.
keep digging on that.
Danny, you've got your marching orders?
yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay.
We're ready for staff reports, I believe. 6A, District Council.
Two items. April has handed out a memo that I provided today to the staff, and this was initiated on the alligator and posting of ponds or lakes, warning of alligators. And this was initiated by a query from Bob Geppert on behalf of the Ponds Group, and I initially responded an email to Bob, and then put it in a more formal memorandum to the board as a whole. In April, I think you advised me today that you heard that in Silver Lakes, there was recently a gator that was trapped, deemed to be a nuisance gator in one of the lakes there, or ponds, within the last
Last week in Silver Lakes.
week. So based upon that, and based upon the case law in the state of Florida, we recommend that districts' ponds and lakes be posted with alligator warning signs. And,
It's gonna be a lot of sun.
well, I'm not sure, once again, I think that's part of the investigation that staff will engage in as to how many do you think are really needed or necessary. I mean, if you go through, for example, FGCU campus, they have them every now and then. It's not all over the place. Even through our number of ponds and lakes on FGCU's campus, they don't, it's not a forest of signs, let me just put it this way. And they're relatively small signs also. So if that's worthwhile, I don't know, April, if you were asking this board to authorize you to initiate that process to get an idea, or you and I work together on that, but we recommend the board consider doing that.
We're not sure, I talked to staff briefly about it, and we're not sure if it's appropriate to put them in the ponds or put them at the entrances of the communities, due to maintenance issues, so we're researching it.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to the board with that at some point as to our recommendation, or just take the action.
If the board requires us to do that, to put out some signage, I'm not sure.
I think the signage is a good idea. Location is probably gonna be problematic at some of the lakes.
Is that something that the board wishes to determine?
I think we can consult with FWC. Might be helpful to do that also, and come back with a
Okay, but I'm
proposed map.
asking, is it the board's direction for me to bring this issue back to the board for approval, the signage?
What are you trying to accomplish with the signage?
Minimize liability and exposure to the
okay,
district in case an
I-
incident occurs.
But the law says,
Yeah,
imposes
but right,
duty
but-
on landowners to-
Well, generally, and then we talk about whether or not there have been incidents of nuisance gators in the area, and that's what the recent incident in Silver Lake.
Is it,
But signage
Which is-
isn't going to eliminate your liability.
It helps to minimize, like, based upon some of the court cases, it helps to protect against having any liability.
Don't we have sovereign immunity?
Yes.
We have, but there's a waiver of sovereign immunity, limited waiver, $200,000 per person, $300,000 per occurrence in the aggregate. And then if we have insurance, then insurance will also cover. But
Isn't what we're really trying to do is avoid anybody being hurt?
What we've done in a couple communities is just put a sign at the entrance to the community. It just says,
yeah, I don't know if I wanna do that.
No.
The thing is that, at the
Welcome to
entrance
Gateway, look out for alligators.
Well, and not only that, at the entrance to communities, you've got all
Especially
kinds
if you play basketball at night.
Yeah.
by a pond.
Put it at the fun
But
park, will
it
you?
can get pretty cluttered with alligators.
Okay, we're gonna ask April to come back to us. with-
Yeah, I think if there's
Okay.
specific
We're gonna ask April to
locations,
come back to
April,
us. Thank you very much, Mr.
One other item, and this might be the one Mr. Measy wants to comment on. If you recall, at the board meeting, where the post orders for Pelican Reserve were discussed. The board asked that the operations and maintenance agreement that's currently in the drafting stage and going back and forth between the district and the Pelican Reserve Property Owners Association, the master, that it have language in there that the access control people and the employees of the security access control vendor have more than annual checks or more than an initial check. And so that was included in the Stony Brook contract. And I think the board said, let's put it in the agreement with Pelican Preserve. And I have an email, and Mr. Measy has had some communications with Mr. French, who's the local person, representative of Securitas, who's the access control security vendor for the Pelican Reserve Property Owners Association. And the indication by Securitas was they do not do annual background checks. They only conduct background checks during the hiring stage. And then they all talk about how the officers are required to have a D license to be a security officer. If any criminal activity is performed, the division that licenses security officers gets notified. And then they have the remedial actions that are taken. And then, so Mr. Measy asked if this satisfied me, and I said, well, as a board directions, we need to go back to the board as to whether or not the board wishes to change its position on requiring that more than annual or initial background check in the Pelican Reserve situation.
Phil, did you want to address the board?
And I apologize, I was remiss in not asking that it be put on the agenda separately. And Mr. Measy reminded me that I mentioned about.
Phil Measy, 9296 Trieste Drive, and representing PPAC. My only concern here is that because this is the way Securitas handles that, we're going to end up with extra expense. It's not in their contract. So if they have to do these annual background checks, they will do them. I must admit, I don't know how much the extra cost would be. It may not be that great, but it will cost us more money. That was my only concern.
And how many professional security guards are on duty in Pelican Reserve?
Probably a half a dozen, I guess, 6 to 8. I'm not sure.
Mr. Newbauer, you were the one that instigated, I guess,
Yeah, sure.
this annual.
They're $100. They're $100 a piece.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, so,
Do you wish to amend your thoughts on this?
no, I don't, but that's all right. It's up to you guys. That's why there's 5 votes.
Can I
Anybody-
ask-
Anybody want to amend the board's position that the security guards have to have an annual refresher, annual renewal of their license, examination, renewal of their license? Pam?
Can I ask Phil, Phil, do you know what a D license means in security, or what it covers, you know?
I don't, Pam. I have to be honest with you. I do not know, but I gather that it provides for reporting for the police or law enforcement to report back, so that information goes to Securitas if there's any criminal activity on the part of one of their officers who has a D license.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, it doesn't seem to me that anybody wants to change our previous resolutions. We still want to have annual checks for our security guards.
Okay.
I think you'll just have to go to cost on things.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing
Thank
it to
you.
our attention. Mr. Parrish?
Nothing further.
Mr. Cantor, Danny?
I have nothing further.
Thank you.
I have one comment for Danny.
Please come
Yes,
stand at
ma'am.
the podium.
I saw the memo on the revolving fund, and congratulations.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah, you were in the mountains hiking when it went up.
Oh.
You're on,
Was
see,
I-
you go on vacation.
Well,
You go on
thank you.
vacation,
I
things
worked
happen.
very hard to get that memo.
Danny, can you send me a copy of the memo you did not see?
Absolutely.
Good work.
That was a good call out, Margaret. Nice job.
Mr. Manager?
The only thing, I did talk to Steven during the meeting. The budget's ready to be released, just, as soon as you're ready for it. They're waiting, Pelican Preserve is going to give them some feedback, but he can prepare it and have it posted whenever you're ready.
We have our meeting tomorrow, which will be to settle our final inputs this evening.
And how do you convey your final input to Stephen? Do you contact him directly?
Through our financial person.
Okay, and after your meeting, will that be done promptly?
Expeditiously.
Thank you very much.
Would you, I'm not done, still on the budget. The question is, would you like to look at it one more time before he releases it? Present it at your first August meeting, or did you want to just go ahead and release it?
Yeah, I do.
I think we should,
I'd like that.
I do.
since
I-
I'm gonna be
Okay.
here for that.
I didn't understand. What did you say you started?
Yeah, I don't wanna see it next meeting.
I'd like to too, because I won't be here.
This side of the table wants to see it at the next meeting. Cal? I'm sorry. We have a majority that wants to see it again at the next meeting.
Okay,
And that's hopefully with the
Yes,
Pelican Reserves.
the date that we were shooting for was August 2nd, was to have it done so that on August 4th, you could see the final budget with our final numbers in it.
Okay.
That's where we were headed.
And what was the resolution as far as what's gonna be on the district website? What did he find out from Stephen?
I will find out for you.
No, I'll find out through you.
What have you found out from Stephen about putting the revised, up-to-date budgets on the district? website?
And the amendments.
with the, he could do it whenever you're ready. We send it to Diane and she posts it.
Yeah, okay. Well,
If you want to do it immediately after your next meeting, after you've reviewed it, we can do it at that time.
that sounds pretty good.
We obviously have an issue from somebody in the audience, so why don't you put it, what we have plus the amendments now, that they could come to the meeting informed.
They will be able to come to the meeting informed because as soon as we get at the next meeting, first meeting in August, we'll have Pelican Reserves changes in it, and we'll all be looking at it again. If there's any further changes, they will be,
But the amendments that we already have are still there in public, and they should be.
say again,
The amendments that we've already done
agreed to.
should be public information.
I think they are.
Well, they
Cal?
are, isn't
Yes.
somebody
They
who's
are.
supposed to help George with
The
finding the
amendments
information?
weren't there.
Yes,
No,
he
no, the
said they
amendments
were.
aren't. They are, the amendments are or aren't on the website.
Well, they're in the minutes, they're not on the website.
I stand corrected. Okay, the original budget. is
Right,
not-
the original budget's on the website. The one that was approved as the tentative that was sent to the county.
Okay, but we have at least 3 amendments after that.
Yes,
And we're gonna have a 4th.
possibly.
The question before the House is, number one, do we wanna put, budget number 4 on the website now? Or do we wanna wait until Pelican and other changes have been made and put number 5 on, which is the one presumably that we will be working on at the public meeting for adoption?
Correct. That's the question.
personally, I think we should go ahead and put 4 on the front page of the website, and you might even make a note that, check back, there may be a version 5.
Okay, it's okay?
But we should put the amendments on there as well.
That's what she said.
No, she just said put version 4.
That includes all the amendments.
It just doesn't include any Pelican Preserve changes that may come down the
It
pike.
would be the most up-to-date with all of the changes.
Cal, are we all speaking, don't doubt
I
that.
believe you are, unless you want them separated out. The version 4 will include all of the amendments that has been approved by
We'll
this
show
board.
all the
Yes,
amendments in there.
right.
So we'll call it 4C with 3 amendments. Okay, good.
Okay.
Cal, do you have anything else for us?
No, sir.
Okay, Doug, do you have anything?
We've got April's employment contract that came in after the meeting book.
Oh,
It's not a contract, but the job
I mean, the
description.
job description.
job description.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, copies, sure.
Board members have seen the job description that was sent.
Did you get the email? Did you get the email?
And do we have? Yeah. So you've got in this, what April is passing out is Tony's memo as well as the job description. And we can review it. There's some discussion points that we need to go through as far as if we accept the job description, we will need to vote to have April transition into that role. The open items that we need to pin down is the salary, the specific salary, and waive the 90-day probationary period.
No.
I heard a no. Would you elaborate on what?
It's
you-
simple. We have a
no?
90-day probationary period. Number 2, this came in after the agenda items were supposed to be in, so this is another last-minute type of situation. We shouldn't have last-minute situations for this. Right now, we haven't even evaluated the gentleman that we saw in the first meeting that he's fully participated. Next objection, we're putting somebody into a position where we haven't had any requests for other people that might be better qualified. So all we're doing is requesting waivers, et cetera, and no.
Okay, Margaret, Sam?
No, my only objection to this is the timing. I mean, it'd be nice if we could put this on the next agenda, rather than this is the end of the meeting. So I think we need a chance to go over this, and I'd like to put it on the next agenda if you don't mind. That's my only objection.
Margaret?
I would like for it to be on the next agenda only because I think we always get accused of not communicating with the public well enough. That this needs to be an agenda item that if somebody saw it on the agenda, they would have the ability to come in and make comments or email us comments on an agenda item.
Doug, I think it's gonna be on the next agenda.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Do you have anything else for us?
Nope.
Anybody have anything else for us?
Yes. This came out by the city of Fort Myers in the latest water and sewer bill. And it's a 2-sided page that talks about help protect our waterways at all times. They allude to the fact that city of Fort Myers, everything bases upon the Caloosahatchee River. But I looked at this and thought, how wonderful it would be if Mr. Tinkle modified, yes, the other Mr. Tinkle, modified this for Gateway, and we put it in as an insert in the next mail-out of the water sewer bills. And it talks about the fact of storm grates and about leaves in your gutter and robbing fish of vital oxygen and trash and leaves and grass and fertilizer and pet wastes. And then I noticed in here that it already talked about timberwood, where people are already going into the preserve area and all that other stuff. And this falls into the same thing of we don't communicate.
I was gonna just say communicate.
And that might be actually a really good lead into all the money we're gonna spend for pond restorations. You know, let people know how important the ponds are.
Did you, Garrett, did you intend to give this to Mr. Tinkle?
Yes, sir.
Would you come forward and receive the
So, Mr. Tinkle, you don't mind? Okay. Thank you.
I think it's overdue anyway.
Gary, do you have anything else for us? Pam?
No.
Margaret?
Nope.
John?
I'm good.
Anyone?
Just FYI, there was some, educational stuff put out on the website, about the algae, and we have a frequently asked questions list out there, and then there was something, I can't remember what it was specifically, but there's one other article that we put out there Monday on the news post, so there's 3 articles out there that we posted this week.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone? We are adjourned.
Just an FYI.
Stepping it up.